This was not a good day for the Reds at the Asian African Conference. Pro-Western spokesmen took the play away from Chou En-lai, with the foreign minister of Iraq taking the lead as he called communism a form of colonialism that breeds hatred, and he was roundly cheered. Meanwhile, in Hungary, the communist regime ousted a premier who had urged a better life for the people and put in a man who was expected to be tough. Here at home, former President Truman had a field day in the witness chair, as reported now by David Brinkley at NBC News, Washington.
Harry Truman has done lots of other things, but today was the first time in his life he's ever been a witness before a committee. He enjoyed it, and so did the other people in the room. It's a Senate subcommittee looking for ideas for changes in the United Nations Charter. Truman was the first witness. Herbert Hoover and Mrs. Roosevelt come later. Truman avoided any specific recommendations, saying he'd had experience with people on the sidelines telling the coach what to do, but he said the fact the UN still exists is itself a hopeful fact. Then Senator Nolan asked him about UN members' contributions in Korea.
Frankly, I was not quite satisfied in feeling that it was effective collective security in action when out of the 60 members, as you know, only 16 of them outside of the United States supplied any forces. Those 16 applied, if my figures are correct, approximately 45,000 to our 450,000.
Senator, I think the principal reason that a great many of the nations did not make military contribution to the effort in Korea was due to the fact that they were not financially able to do it. And I think that when the prosperity of those nations is increased by world peace, and they get into a position where they can function as active members of the United Nations, I think the vast majority of them would come across.
You would feel, would you, Mr. President, that if nations are to get the benefits, and we believe there are material benefits under the United Nations Charter, that they also, like a citizen of our country, assume certain obligations to contribute when their aid is needed.
I agree with that, and I think they would. And you must understand, too, in order to get some of our citizens to operate, we have to draft them.
And he added that he favors keeping the Russians in the UN where the whole world can see how badly they behave. Now back to John Cameron Swayze in New York.
Next, David Brinkley gives us his second report on the problem of school segregation. Now, last week he found the Carolinas spending more on separate schools with no plans for desegregation.
This week in St. Louis, he finds a different situation. 1 year after the Supreme Court decision for integration, the Carolinas and other southern states had not moved in that direction. But here in the border state of Missouri, the St. Louis schools launched a full-scale desegregation program in less than the year the court allowed for study of methods. At the time of the decision, St. Louis started desegregation in its special schools, then teachers' colleges, and then 2 months ago in high schools like this one. Elementary schools are next. Does it work? Correspondent Brinkley asked Philip J. Hickey, Superintendent of Instruction for St. Louis.
Mr. Hickey, you're winding up your first semester here since you ended segregation. How has it worked?
Well, we feel that the integration of the secondary schools has worked at a level much higher than even our best hopes would have anticipated.
Have you had any friction or difficulties of any kind?
With the exception of one minor problem in one of the high schools, which is a problem that we'd probably have had any day, and anyway, we've had no problems of any kind.
Well, why did you go ahead with it now instead of waiting for the final decision from the Supreme Court?
Well, our Board of Education, of course, is the responsible body in this community. And if you know St. Louis, that from the time that Jefferson took over this territory as part of the United States, there's always been a great belief in democracy.
Well, Mr. Hickey, as best you can tell, since you ended segregation, how do the students like it? Are they pretty happy with it or not?
Well, I think the students have taken this as just a part of the regular school life.
Here in Salt and Blewett High School, as in St. Louis' total population, the ratio of Negroes is about 30%. Here's what the students say.
Before the ending of the segregation came, the children in the grade school would fight each other. But they didn't even understand why they were fighting each other. They didn't even have a good reason.
Well, as far as I've seen, it's worked out wonderfully. I mean, we haven't had any trouble at all. And, I mean, there are no instances. Maybe there were a few instances where we had a little, but it was not noticeable. And I've had a grand time. And I'm doing the best I can here.
Really, it's worked out much better than many of us expected. I mean, at first when we heard that segregation was going to end, we anticipated a lot of trouble. And I mean, there was a lot of talk in the school about trouble that might happen. But really, it's worked out fine, and I'm really glad that the schools have been integrated now.